Hello, I am Shyo Wager. This is the EMEA/NA playoffs predictions. Let's get started. Into EMEA first, Fnatic versus BBL. You can see the entire roster actually in terms of the entire bracket in terms of the playoffs. I'm going with Fnatic first. Now, looking at the team in general, how they played, looking strong the entire time, and honestly, translating what their performance was in Toronto to over here, it's looking the same, if not better, from map to map. Their pools as well in terms of maps have been absolutely amazing. Their Ascent, Icebox, and Bind are really good. I think their Haven is something that needs to be worked on just the defense side specifically. I think they always bring it back on attack. Either or, my memory eludes me for the moment, but one of the sides on Haven needs a little bit of work. But when it comes to playoffs, I think we'll be totally fine. Slow paced Fnatic. We did see that loss to Liquid, but Liquid looked like one of the best teams in the entire world at that point. They really locked them down, but these guys bumped back, popped off on Apex. We'll talk a little bit more about Liquid, but over here, Fnatic over BBL, who in my opinion, yes, had some hard fought wins over Vitality, a little bit of a sense of showing on Heretics as well, but this is them facing Heretics when they were still kind of leveling up. Heretics coming in from a EWC win as well, looking very confident. I'm very confident in BBL's chances to make that fourth seed overall. I talked about it on Cosmic Divide a little bit, but for this one, I just think pound for pound when it comes to shooting, there's a gap between both these teams. And I feel like in consistency, I don't really see Fnatic really having two people having a bad day, where in BBL sometimes that could be a possibility. It might take a little bit of a map to get to, everyone on the team shooting like they need to. And if that's the case, I don't think you can drop a map in a BO3 against Fnatic. Let's move on to Giants versus Na'Vi. Now, Giants, looking at their overall history, who they played, the team themselves as well. I really like this team because they have identity. They've developed an identity over the entire second stage. The introduction of Aura and Flickless, the initiator duelist combination, has been really good when it works. But sometimes Giants can be a little bit one note. Other times it can be lost in terms of what they're doing on the map entirely. And a lot of the times inside this group, when faced with a harder challenge in a team like Heretics, a team like Foot when they're playing relatively okay, they do get diffed in gun skill. That being said, their opponents are going to be Na'Vi from the other side of the alpha bracket. Now, when it comes to Na'Vi, I think consistency is what we're looking for. The addition of Alexic, the kind of solidifying of Ruxic in his actual Ruxic, sorry in the pronunciation, in his roles has been amazing in stage 2. This team actually is looking scary, and it's some of the people's picks for a dark horse that makes that fourth seed inside EMEA. The question is, how consistent can Na'Vi be? Are they going to be using crazy angel comps? Are we going to be doing the right things on ecos and on bonuses? Are they going to be taking the game as seriously as possible? I think against Giants, there is a little bit clear push towards Na'Vi being the winners inside this matchup. I just think when it comes to momentum as well, when a team grabs momentum, I think Na'Vi is more likely to grab it. They're more likely to be the heavier shooters on the day. The set plays that Giants have, I feel like Na'Vi have a better understanding of it as well. They have really good anti-strats against teams that have pocket plays in like things like Ascent mid, things like just, defaults into just a main pop on Lotus. I feel like Na'Vi have this one. Moving on to the lower side of the bracket, we'll have BBL versus Carmen Core. That's Heretics. Let me go to Carmen Core. Here we go. KC has been a very interesting team to watch when looking at their development in stage 2. They started off as a team that we could just write off as bottom of the pack. Will they, won't they? What's the situation by? But around like that Apex Koi week, we started to see Avez really stand out in terms of his fragging potential. Sadak start to stand out in his consistency. And in week 5, I believe, they picked up Pyro, who looked interesting. These guys got a win over Team Liquid. And on paper, if you looked at the VLR in general, you were like, okay, how did this game go? You could kind of see things inside the scoreboard, Sugetsu popping off, the sunset overtimes, everything being close, Sugetsu really playing well, and make a judgment call that KC have really leveled up. But if you watch this game specifically, if you watch some of the games from stage 2 for KC, a lot of the times their opponents are doing some sort of weird things or maybe having an off week. Specifically for this game, looked like Liquid were already in Paris. Like they just landed, they're eating some local food around the town, and they're not worried about this matchup whatsoever. From the Liquid that we saw in the Fnatic week compared to the KC matchup, I genuinely, it was a night and day difference. I feel like Liquid just didn't care for this matchup as much, and I still know that Liquid want to win, but this was not a Liquid that we saw that was ready to win playoffs. They were almost happy while losing rounds. Everything was kind of lackadaisical, and they still took a map off of KC. So I mean, they were guaranteed a first seed still in this matchup. They might have not wanted to give away any VODs. When it comes to KC in general, you know, looking at some of the maps, they do play some of the most contested maps on the scene. They do have a little bit of a corrode, or they don't mind jumping in on corrode as well when it matters, but I'm not really convinced on their innovation on some of these maps, more so than their consistency on others. When we look at fragging power pound for pound as well, I think BBL and KC are slightly matched, but I might edge it over to BBL in general as well. I just think that this team has some crazy shooters that have been leveling up. Sociable, especially towards the last 2 games, was playing so well to get his team early leads. Profec's been in the business on everyone's VFL and has been outshining some of the teams generally when he's having an on game. And Magnum's clutch rate has been really good this entire scene, not to mention the guaranteed 11 4K we get every single game. Question just is, will everyone be online? This team is just about, are they here on the day? I think in the lower brackets with their backs against the wall, BBL win this one out. KC have an unfortunate showing, which kind of sucks because you want KC in Paris. I think there's definitely, like, I would give this like a 45% chance for both teams to win, and a 10% chance. Is that a gap of 10%? Maybe. A leftover percent chance for, like, I don't even know, mates to get a money in the bank, come in and do a 3-way fight in lower round 1 to win a game. Some crazy magic shit happening, but regardless, BBL in the business. Now, Giants versus Vitality. We talked a lot about Giants. Let's talk about Team Vitality here. One of the other teams that people are kind of seeding as their dark horse to make it all the way through to the playoffs as the 4th seed in EMEA. At the beginning, Vitality not looking too hot with Unfake. There were a lot of questions on that first week, but if you watch their game against Giants, this matchup has already happened once before. You would see that a lot of Unfake's preparedness was just not up to par. And his adaptiveness in using Durka as well in troubling moments when he figures out the enemy's default or positions or setups was also not up to par. It just felt like Unfake was like a trainer that only had maybe 1 gym badge playing with like level 50 Pokemon. Right? He had an understanding of the type matchups in the game. He had an understanding of Pokemon in general, but just the work that he had to put in to be able to use pieces like Durka, like Les, like Kovac even in certain moments on where he wants to put him in a post, or we're talking about some of the smokes you want to be thrown across the map. I just think that in the first week against Giants, it was a little bit of a learning curve that he was running into. The win versus Foot really helped for his confidence. Even in losses versus Heretics and BBL afterwards, you can see that he is still learning. Vitality are still kind of playing well. They just need to lock this stuff in. You know, we need to start getting wins for these weeks. And that came in when they won their easier matches against BBL, or against Gentlemates, excuse me. Against BBL, though, tough loss. We still saw some life from these guys and really good calls on maps like Lotus, which are hard to navigate as well. So on set plays, maybe Lotus and Bind, or Icebox and Bind, you might not be seeing as much when it comes to the cohesion of the team. But when it comes to cerebral plays, looks like Unfake really leveled up. And on that last week as well, they did actually pick up Safe. And Safe might be subbing in for people as well when it comes to maybe maps like Abyss they've had prepped in the past. And with Safe on the roster now, I just feel like Giants are going up against a Na'Vi that's leveled up, and then a Vitality that's just paid to win. So what do you do in this scenario? You go home, unfortunately, which sucks, because again, I love the roster changes that Giants made. I hope they stay for the next season. Let's talk about the upper bracket. Team Heretics versus Fnatic. Banger match. Gotta be wondering what we're doing here. Honestly, it could go either way. Map pools again and momentum. I just feel like Heretics have a better Haven. They're evenless. Fnatic maybe have a better Ascent. They're kind of evenly matched on the Lotus. I'm gonna give this one over to, man, this one's actually just kind of tough. Maybe we just come back to this one. Liquid versus Na'Vi. Personally, Liquid are just in form right now, and I feel like there's a little bit of a gap when it comes to just aiming in the server as well between Liquid and Na'Vi. When you look at some of the things that Kiko was doing in this Fnatic map, it was insane. Even in the KC map, when he was just kind of holding things back and chilling out, going nuts. Camo was in the business as well. Trex looks absolutely alive. It looks nuts. Nats also is just Nats in general. So I'm keeping Liquid up in this pool. The question is, who do I want to see face Liquid? Honestly, that's kind of how I'm thinking about this, because on the day this is just a 2-1 type of match, right? Between Heretics and Fnatic. I'm gonna say let's rock Heretics in this one, and I'll tell you why in just a second. We're gonna go for a Na'Vi versus BBL type situation here. Okay, I'm rambling because I'm trying to think about what happens next here, and there's ways we can do this. So there's a few things that could happen in these playoffs, right? And there's a few storylines that I actually really like to see. First of all, Heretics, Fnatic, Liquid are kind of everyone's top three with who's going to be the fourth. And we already see who's going to be the fourth at the bottom. If Na'Vi beat out Liquid here, because Liquid always need a loss to power up, I feel like they always have to power up, we could see the Liquid versus Vitality rematch, which would be kind of a gigabanger. I would love to see that. But at the same time, with Liquid's preparedness, I just feel like this is going to be, this is the tournament in playoffs where Liquid don't need their power up anymore. Liquid are not coming in as season 1 Naruto. They're coming in with, like, you know, the three tails rocking through, like 3 of the tails are visible, pain arc type beat, like they've learned Sage Jutsu. So I can't look at that bottom Vitality versus Liquid rematch. Maybe Vitality level it up from the bottom, we'll see what's up, but I can look at Fnatic versus Liquid for a grand final. That's kind of what I want inside EMEA. So let's see if we can push that all the way forward. So Fnatic are also, I believe, if you look at the champ points, and I'll be able to check this a bit later, but they're going to be qualifying regardless anyways for champions. So we're big chilling. Let's look at Na'Vi versus BBL real quick. I think against this, or inside this matchup, I'm a little bit more of a BBL stan than a Na'Vi fan. And when it comes to the way these guys play the game too, I just like the heavy IGLing of Yampi, more so than the adaptiveness of Angel. I'm going to also lean towards these guys actually being online after the KC win as well, and Na'Vi looking a little bit distraught after the loss. Na'Vi can be a very swingy team when it comes to win losses as well, so we'll rock BBL on the bottom bracket. Vitality versus Fnatic would be the bottom over here. I really want to see Vitality going forward, but I just don't see a reality where Vitality is taking out one of the top 2 teams and then also making it all the way to Paris. I'm not sure what their win cons are entirely here, but I think Fnatic just take it through the lower bracket. I might be disrespecting Fnatic a little bit by putting them in through the lower bracket as well. But I just think Heretics with their momentum might be able to just slam Fnatic all the way down. And then Fnatic just rinses everyone in here to get to the grand finals, wins the rematch against Heretics, and then Liquid win the region. That is kind of where I'm looking at the playoffs, looking for, or looking through. Now, many different things that happen. There is a reality where Na'Vi beats Liquid, very possible, and then somehow they're in the grand final and they win entirely. I think TMV might have that rocking in, but I'm rocking in through the Team Liquid side, and I'm looking at Fnatic playing more games in general and really fixing some of the mistakes they have on some of the halves of these maps and becoming a much stronger team, which will in turn put them into a position to make the grand finals and champions. I think this will be a Fnatic arc inside EMEA, and if not, then I believe it'll be a Liquid arc. I think Heretics are set to win through the upper semis. I mean, I guess if Fnatic wins, it's a little bit of a Heretics arc, but I think Heretics just diffs all these bottom teams. This is what we're looking at, though. These are the pick'ems. We're going to submit them. If you agree, if you disagree, you can type in the comments below, but I do see a few nexus points where things could change between Liquid Na'Vi, between Heretics, Fnatic. I just think things go either way. I think Heretics just have a more tight sense and control on their maps. Fnatic have a few bad halves and are sometimes lacking momentum and always proving that they can come through on comebacks. I feel like it might be hard to come back versus Team Heretics in playoffs. Let's see what happens. We can exit all of these, move forward to North America. So yes, America Stage 2 playoffs pick'ems begin. What are we looking at here? Lev C9 to start, looking at the groups in general as well. I've watched both these regions quite a bit. I have a lot of opinions on Americas, and I feel like it's a little bit easier to segment teams inside Americas and what they're doing. Now, the question here is C9's playoff curse. Are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? And I feel like they've been set up in this group to be playoff cursed once more. If you look at this group, it's 2 big teams and everyone else is kind of fodder. And when you look at C9, they've beat all the fodder and they've been absolutely diffed by the two good teams. They have diffed the fodder completely as well. This EG game too was, I think, genuinely a boring smashing from C9. They genuinely just completely beat the hell out of EG, which is one of the only teams you might not be able to say is fodder, has some sort of life within them. I think there's a big gap between 2G, Furia, and EG. That was a theory, the reality, but things might have changed a little bit. In this matchup, they're going up against a team, Leviathan, who's beaten Crew, beaten the likes of a souped up NRG, beaten MIBR, granted in a week where things might have been going bad for them still. Hashtag takes them 2 games. It's a theory to get all the way up. But in my opinion, when facing a team that has set strats, a GOAT, consistent type of gameplay, I'm putting Leviathan over C9. I just don't think C9 has been challenged enough in this stage. I don't think they've learned enough from facing Sentinels in G2, because those games have been absolute smash outs from like an aim perspective, from a basic fundamental setup perspective. It's not like Sen G2 were playing crazy, but they also weren't using like the complete depth and pocket of their strat book to beat C9. Sometimes it was just head-to-head aim. Sometimes it was just a basic thing and basic calls that were better for the more powerful team, that being said in G2. And questions from C9 as to what we're doing on some post plants, what we're doing in general to try to attack a little section of the map. Anyways, we'll take Leviathan over on this time. G2 versus 100 Thieves. This is an interesting one. Now, the question is, are G2 playing with Baby Bay or are G2 playing with Leaf? And the bigger question for me actually is, does it matter? I think 100 Thieves coming into this were one of the most interesting teams to watch inside North America. The addition of Kess and the benching of Boostio made this team a Swiss Army knife more so than just a machete. You feel me? Or I guess, I mean, maybe a flip knife if we're looking at, you know, size of the team, because the IGL might be a little bit short. Regardless, now with Kess, they have the opportunity to be more creative with their comps. They have the opportunity to, in post plans, have a little bit more firepower. And they were slightly more unpredictable in their earlier weeks. When you look on later, though, against teams that actually have a little bit more cohesion, sorry about that loud, but sometimes you did look a little bit messy in some of these rounds and not really put together the entire way. I think communication was an issue for that. But teams that have their core identities locked in, maybe their strats and their depth of thinking for the game isn't that deep either. You know, things like Lev or Sato Go Kill. 100 Thieves started to have a little bit of trouble. Started to get red on some of their strats as well on some of these maps. I found Bind to be one of their stronger maps, and although they were kind of duking on bad teams through there, when MIBR had that big comeback, there were so many gaps in their gameplay and struggles in some of these retakes where I was just confused as to what 100 Thieves were doing. They were approaching things mistimed, taking 40 seconds to clear like U-Haul to find plants. And then you look at some of these games versus Lev, they were getting absolutely smashed. And at a certain point on Lotus, you were asking, do 100 Thieves even have the stamina to play this long and the mental fortitude to keep rocking in? I genuinely feel like 100 Thieves is a really good team in stage 1 or kickoff next year. They just need a little bit more development. The question is, are they going to be getting it through playoffs over here inside NA? We'll see how long they last in the lower bracket, because I'm choosing G2 even with Baby Bay. And Baby Bay is honestly just leveling up to be a really good role player. I feel like there's a gap in North America regardless with him on the team. And G2 is still miles ahead when it comes to aim and approach to the game comparatively to 100 Thieves. Now, against NRG, there's a question. Can G2 stop the Mata show? We're going to start at the lower side of upper semifinals first, and then move to the lower rounds really quick, because these are some interesting games. Let's just quickly answer this question between Sen and Lev. Lev have 1 Sato. I feel like Sen have 4 Satos, man, or even 5 Satos. Like the genuine improvement from all Sentinels players, both in the games that don't matter inside the stage, where, you know, you're going to be shitting on 2G, shitting on Furia, completely destroying literally almost every team except for G2, where they had some trouble in that first week and Baby Bay was still in the business. I just feel like this team is getting better even when they beat bad teams. They get more consistent. They have better firepower. I'm rocking Sen. If I see Sen, I'm genuinely rocking Sen. The question is, do they just win the BO5? You know, that's the genuine question. G2 against NRG, I'm going to replay what happened in a last year's bracket, put NRG up, and believe in the Mata show. I believe that G2 will actually benefit if Leaf is playing from more games inside the playoff. I think they'll benefit from playing with Baby Bay more as well in the lower round. And maybe NA in general will benefit from facing teams like G2 in the lower round more so than a team like NRG, which just have one big fragger, one simple way to play the game, at the same time, if you look at NRG and some of their matches, some of their rounds, especially, I might have been missing the crew match, but against MIBR, the absolute just resilience this team has, and the reliance of not just Mata but the whole team in general to set him up has been amazing. There's so many different ways you can. This team is like the Hitman World of Assassination team, where there's so many ways to approach the round. Agent 47 is still that main character in there, right? Mata is still shooting, but there's so many different ways they can set him up, and he always is consistent and online on the day. I'm just curious if NRG can keep that up moving through this entire playoff stage. Let's go for Cloud9. Let's look at the lower round, and this I think would be classified as an upset. Let's see what happens. I think G2 have a really good anti-book as well, but again, not sure if Leaf is playing, not sure if Babyface is playing. I just think G2 benefit from more games in playoff in general, or from the playoffs in general. C9 versus Crew, again, facing one of the more strict teams that are popping off. I'm gonna actually push C9 forward because I feel like I haven't seen Crew have their their match where they're completely complacent and have no idea what's going on. Like, this again is just I think it's starting to become a player difference almost between NRG and Crew, and Crew are trying different things with this double duelist composition that like might be working, might not be working. The addition of Dante Deus has been interesting overall, but not as successful as Sato or Mata on other teams. They're going to be going up against Oxy and a C9 that's very hungry after the Lev loss, and we haven't seen one of those weeks where Crew literally has no idea what they're doing and how they're playing. That week might be coming up in playoffs again. I think it happened last year. It might be repeating this year. We'll see what happens. 100 Thieves versus EG. The question is, do I believe in an EG playoff run? The answer is no. To talk about EG a little bit, dude, honestly, the more ingredients you add to a pot, the longer the motherfucker takes to cook, right? These guys had some amazing I think approaches in week 1 to things, where like Derek was on Chamber on Lotus and dropping 30 kills. Then they swap it over to someone else, and the Lotus comp swaps entirely to him playing Teo, and then they're playing his G2 and taking 3 hours to approach things on Corrode, which is fine. I think EG might be one of the best Corrode teams in the entire world, because that map, its cheat code is playing attack slowly, generally. And I think no one else is doing it as good as EG is doing it, bar maybe Sentinels, but they don't even play it that slow because they have a inkling on the timings of the map. But on everything else, man, EG just look flat. They look a little bit dead, and yeah, they're beating Furia, but losing a few rounds as well towards the end. At the end of the day, that game towards the week 5 as well wasn't as important, but it's in my mind, I just think 100 Thieves have a big gap between them and this team. The question then comes to what happens next. Let's solve G2 versus C9. I talked about the lower bracket run. I think this is where things end for C9. Then questions happen about how they're going to improve for next year. Again, I don't think this is a playoff curse. I think this is a systemic issue on how groups are decided inside North America and the groups in general in NA. C9 are just in an interesting place where they get practice against a lot of other teams that are bad a little bit more consistently, and they learn from those matches a little bit more on how to be slightly better. But against the big XP pools, right, against the big bosses, they never actually finish. They never gain any experience. They never look better after a loss to a good team. And if the gap is that big between them and the good teams, I just never see how we're getting better unless we have more good teams for C9 to play. Maybe 2 teams is not enough. If there was one more team for C9 in this group to be able to play, if we swapped like EG and say NRG, EG and Crew, if there was some firepower for them to go against, maybe we'd have a situation, we'd have something that's popping off. But yeah, that's not happening there. Lev versus 100 Thieves. Locking in Lev. Hashtag Sato. Hashtag Okeanos. Hashtag Comet Splanking always. At this point, we're kind of going on vibes. I think between these two teams, if you look at the head-to-heads beforehand, Lev were on top of them, and genuinely when it comes to stamina, I feel like 100 Thieves have a little bit of an issue. And I think that Leviathan are very good at gaining momentum inside games as well. 100 Thieves look a little bit lost without the momentum. Crew also look lost without the momentum. And it kind of functions on momentum as well, which is very interesting. Sato, although stops though on the lower round 3, G2 are able to win this one. Sentinels versus NRG. Sen will show you guys how to contain a monster. They will show you. And G2 always learns. They never lose twice. The grand final will be the classic we always see happen, and it'll actually be important because I think first seed is important for what's happening in the next stage. And genuinely, if I'm thinking about the best things for NA, I'm locking in G2 to win this, because I think G2 works better with chilling, having VODs to watch, especially now playing with Baby Bay, understanding the vibe of how to feel when you're in the game, out of the game. Their mental is just so much better. I don't think they'll ever get whammied in a game again. The Sentinels, when it comes to internationals, needs that group stage to warm up. I think one of the issues for Sen, as I believe they were first seed in Toronto, that an issue where they didn't get to play as many games as everyone else. We saw some, problems in their gameplay as a result, just getting used to the stage. So they're not going to be getting whatever benefit there is from first seed. They'll have to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and play as second seed. I'm not sure if that's like even as equivalent or what the situation is in Paris. I have to look into that. But those are my pick'ems. Do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know who you have winning grand finals, and genuinely let me know which region you think wins champions. Right now, the strongest region in my mind that has a chance to, that I'm seeing appear more in most pick'ems, is actually EMEA, because I see people putting PRX as the winners, putting what used to be Gen G as the winners and stuff, but it's always against an EMEA team. It's always PRX versus Fnatic. PRX wins. Even the people that are guessing Sentinels, it's always Sentinels versus like a Fnatic. Even for me, I have a Team Liquid versus PRX final matchup, and I think that TL is winning. But that's just me being a head ass. I feel like APAC is the region that we're supposed to be picking, but if that's vocal minorities first place and the majority second place is the MEA, maybe we look at the majority. Regardless, subscribe to the YouTube. Cool videos coming out tomorrow. And follow me on Twitch. I'm streaming almost every day. We're co-streaming. A little bit of food poisoning today, but we should be live right now if you're watching this video, looking at EMEA and North America later. Peace.